Into every generation, a Slayer is born. Right? If you're a Buffy fan and you're here because you want to hear more about Buffy's character, you are in the right place. Not only am I a certified strengths coach, so my name is Becca Simon. I coach authors in specifically in Clifton Strengths Alignment, but I am also a Buffy fan. And so, my goal in this episode is to talk about how we see the character development in the character of Buffy over the 7 seasons of the show. And I'm going to reference specific moments and specific episodes, trying to kind of illustrate that resonance that I see that can only really come from behavioral alignment. So, where the emotions match the external situation and the resolution matches reality, right? So, that kind of resonance creates a special kind of connection between a reader or a watcher and a character. So, if you are a fan of Buffy, I think you're going to like this. If you're a fan of strengths, I think you're going to like this as well. But also, this is meant to be a little bit of personal alignment because, as we've talked about in previous character episodes, alignment is the key to being able to write resonant characters. And some of you are going to get there intuitively, and some of you are going to need a little bit of help. So, we're going to think kind of critically or strategically or logically about the alignment, and specifically about the way that the development arc of a character can be more resonant if it's aligned with, like, let's say, a particular strength. Today, we're probably going to talk more about command and significance than we talk about any other strengths, although Buffy has strategic as well. I've talked in previous Patreon posts about what I think her top 5 are. So let's dig into this a little bit though, because I want to go through some specific moments with both that command strength and that significant strength that I think will help us understand the alignment of this character. So the first thing is, if you don't know what Clifton strengths are, they are collections of really strong talents. So not just like, I think I'm pretty good at this, but this is the best thing about me. This is the thing of all the things I could be great at that I'm great at. So those are your top 5 strengths essentially. And when you have a most dominant strength or a number one strength, it is the top 1% capacity that you have as a person to be able to develop towards success. So when I say that Buffy is high in command, what I'm basically saying is there is a collection of skills that you are good at when you have high command, that she has that set of skills. Or we see illustrations, because of course Buffy's never taken the Clifton Strengths test, so I don't know, but we see illustrations of those. And if I had to guess, I would say that command is one of her dominant strengths for specific reasons. And the most specific is that her development arc, the large arc of her over the course of the seasons, is a command arc. It is this very big responsibility has been put on my shoulders, and I am the person who can do this, and I keep being called to do this, but not always resourced to do this, not always free to do this. So I'm struggling with the weight of this sort of calling, and specifically this calling is leadership, right? Not just protection. And I think this is important to understand command, because you can have just a leadership strength from responsibility, maybe belief, focus, probably most of the executing domain strengths. But command is an influencing strength. And very specifically, the way we describe command in sort of Gallup circles is that when they walk into a room, they have a presence and everyone looks to them. So, sort of a positional authority in terms of the vibes of a person. If Buffy walks into a room, especially as you see her develop into her set of command traits over the course of the seasons, she walks into a room and people are aware that she is in charge. So they will look to her in situations because she seems like the most self-possessed person. Even when she's having a lack of self-confidence, even when she's questioning herself. So, like, let's start off with one of the most interesting in terms of, I don't think that it's possible to have a more kind of profound illustration of the weight of her calling, the weight of her responsibility, small r responsibility, than the superstar episode in season 4. And when Jonathan tricks everyone through magic that he is the most important person in Sunnydale, he's the most important person in the world, and you see how Buffy responds in that moment when they're all sitting there planning together or talking about what's happening with this monster. And she's biologically confused why people aren't listening to her. Of course, with the spell that Jonathan created, he's tricked everyone into listening to him over her. But she's confused. Like, I have the best plan. I should be in charge here. Why is no one listening to me? But the magic sort of holds her back for a second. But this is what we see consistently over and over with her. And I think this is a uh, something that high command people will feel from the inside. And I think this is the other part about resonance with characters is when I have that trait and I watch someone's journey and I resonate with particular things. I may not resonate with the whole character because I may not have every strength that they have, but I will resonate with particular moments. And there are certain moments that every command person has felt, every strategic person has felt. And that moment from the Superstar episode, where she's sitting there with the best plan, with the obvious leadership role, with the charisma that everyone would normally be looking to lead the room, and no one is listening to her because they're all looking at this man. And it is the most resonant moment for people who have influencing strengths. Or again, strategic can do this because strategic is so used to being ahead of everyone that there's often a feeling with high strategic people that, well, I know what's going on here, and so everyone should listen to me. So that moment in particular will resonate from multiple different angles depending on which strength it is. The strategic would be, I know best. Command would be, I should be in charge. Why is no one listening to me? Especially for command in real life, especially when there's ineffective leadership happening in a room. And what we often say about high command is that I am capable of following if the person who's leading is competent, if I feel there is clarity in the situation or in the process. But as soon as that passes, as soon as there's a lack of competence, or I think that the leadership is stupid, my command would want to be in charge. And there is some element of strategic in that as well, where the strategic strength might feel that way. But in particular, command people will know that feeling from the inside in that Superstar episode. Also illustrated in the Superstar episode about command, which is really fascinating, is the arc of Buffy's romances. Because that episode in particular was the follow up to when Faith had taken over Buffy's body and had slept with Riley, and the two of them were trying to figure out what their relationship should look like from there. And I know Riley's not a popular character among a lot of Buffy fans. I'm probably the only Buffy fan on the planet who thinks that Riley was the best. Especially when I know more about human psychology as an adult and I know more of what she actually needed. And if Riley had been the post Buffy Riley, he would have been a significantly better boyfriend for her because I think he learned something about himself in that experience with her. And unfortunately, that meant, you know, they probably were not going to be able to be together. But also Buffy learned something about herself, which I think was really important. And this episode sort of illustrates a part of it. As a command person, I'm going to have to learn how to be vulnerable. As a potentially, let's say, dismissive, avoidant attachment style person, which I definitely think there's evidence that Buffy was that, I have to learn how to meet my partner halfway. I have to learn how to open up. I have to learn how to allow the emotions to engulf me. And there's this real sense with her character, especially throughout that middle section of season 4, as she's starting to really fall for him. And then in season 5, when their relationship starts to get on the rocks and her mom gets sick, right? We have this sense of like the tension with her between being this very extremely self-possessed, self-confident, very command-ish, very influencing strengths dominant female, trying to exist inside of relationships that have a little bit more structure that's not really for her, right? Like things that are either the person she's with is not in a good alignment with her, which I don't think any of the three major men that she dated or was with, I guess. I don't know if I would say she ever really dated Spike, except for like one episode in season 7 and the like fake date where they were talking about the Slayers. But anyway, I'm getting off track because we're supposed to be talking about the Superstar episode. And in particular, this illustration, which is where I'm going to go next, about how difficult romance is for someone who has these kind of traits. And of course, in that world, in that magic world, has this kind of responsibility, that kind of mantle, it is going to naturally make them have to prioritize their work consistently. And this is something we see with people who are very driven, like maybe a 3 or a 6 Enneagram, who have to prioritize their work, maybe a 2 or a 1 Enneagram, who are very driven to do right or to help people, right? There's a sense where the prioritization of the work is going to happen over relationships sometimes. And the more you want, right, if especially in the case of Riley, the more you want that person and not that position, the more tension there's going to be in that, right? That episode in particular that illustrated that so well was, and we can move on to the next episode now, was the Two Xanders episode in season 5, which is still to this day is one of my favorites. Just because I think that again, the illustrations of these different parts of command are just so brilliantly done. Because from an alignment perspective, that if I could separate this thing of myself out and have that be a disintegrated version of myself, and then have this vulnerable part, right, which was the Two Xanders, it was the separation of Buffy's was intended to be right in order to kill her. But ultimately, it also illustrated this thing in her relationships. And I don't think Riley was alone in in this relationship issue with her. I think all of the men that she was with had this same sort of disintegration, fantasy on some level where like I'm never going to be able to be the priority here because there's always going to be a higher calling. And there's a part of me, if I love someone, that wants to be able to disintegrate that part of them and sort of like not have that be present all the time, right? So even though it was actually in the Riley segment, right? Like it was in the Riley arc. I think it is a consistent issue with people who are wired with a lot of influencing strengths because there's going to be a little bit of an untouchability. Not that all influencing strength dominant people are dismissive avoidant. There are plenty of people who are secure attached. There are plenty of people, I would assume there are some influencing dominant people who are anxious attached as well or fearful avoidant, but there is this tendency when you have both the positional authority and also a lot of influencing strengths that influence can make you be a little bit more distant. That position can make you be a little more distant. And in order to solve that problem, being able to disintegrate those two parts would be really easy in terms of like it would solve the problem for the person who is on the receiving end of that relationship, or they think that it would, right? Because this is the other part about each of these individual arcs that kind of show a tension with her command that's so brilliant, is because that feels like it would be easy. But if you kill one of them, the other one dies, right? And that is just so well done in terms of the story metaphor illustrating something that's really true internally. If you try to disintegrate yourself, even in small ways, Like in a relationship, you try to hold back this part of yourself. In a relationship, you try to pretend you're not emotional, or you try to pretend you don't actually love this person, or you don't want to spend time with them, or you don't, uh, or you're not annoyed with them, or whatever it is that you're holding back and pretending doesn't exist. If you disintegrate one part of yourself, you are a disintegrated whole, right? So it's important that illustration is true, especially again with influencing dominant people. And 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 because of the different pressures in Western society, I would say specifically influencing dominant women are going to struggle with this probably more so than anybody else, just because the long-term socialization of not being an influencing dominant person is so rewarded, right? When you are trained, even just subconsciously, even if you aren't intentionally trained this way, there is this subconscious training in basically every moment of your interactions that is teaching you it's easier to disintegrate. It's easier to disintegrate. And so that particular episode with the two Xanders is just so brilliant of an illustration for people who have high command, probably high significance as well. I would put that into communication woo, 3 Enneagram, probably 4 Enneagram, uh, probably 9 Enneagram, where it would be so much easier to just disintegrate. And that tension with that character, if you can illustrate that in a way that hits this focal point of, I can't be myself unless I stop being this one part in this relationship or this situation. And then the arc is learning that you can't disintegrate without killing both parts, because that is actually also the real arc. And this is what I meant when we first started doing this series. And I said, my goal is to find resonant characters, like characters that people talk about as though they are real people. Eleanor Dashwood is my older sister, or Mr. Darcy is my fantasy boyfriend, or whatever, book boyfriend. Like we talk about them like they're real people because they resonate in a way that is actually consistent with what we see in real life. And this is definitely something that we see in real life, this pressure for people. And it isn't just people who are women either. It is people who are influencing dominant to have a side of themselves that they have to hide in certain relationships or in certain situations, and disintegrate from. And then the goal over time is to learn that we're never going to be whole, and we need to feel whole and secure in order to be able to have a sustainable life. But we're never going to feel whole if we don't integrate both of those parts of ourselves. So again, chef's kiss, brilliant illustration of one of the major pain points of having command significance, which is what I think she probably has. Yeah. So the romance arcs in Buffy get a lot of airtime from people who are doing like critical reception of the show. And in particular, I think the who is a better boyfriend for Buffy question gets asked a lot. And I want to talk about this in terms of the different pain points of command, significance, and strategic. And I want to say, on some level, in terms of just pure personality alignment. So in a romance novel or in a romance arc, in order to have the most resonance for the landing, right? And I will say Buffy's not a romance show. So the landing of this particular arc will not end in resolution for her romance, because that wasn't the point of the show. So what we're going to see over and over again when romance is not the point, like the development of the romance arc is really just a subplot at any one moment in the show. The resolution of the show is a power resolution, right? It is an empowering resolution. We'll get to that in a second. But because it's not a romance, you're not actually going to see her end up with the person who's the best for her, because basically what they're doing through these three men in this arc, is we're illustrating what is not good, and then what is not good, and then what is not good, right? So at these three different points in Buffy's romantic past, not in her romance novel arc, because she doesn't have one of those, but in her romantic past, this would sort of be like the backstory to Buffy's romance novel would be Angel, Riley, and Spike, right? None of them are the person she's going to end up with. Even though there's this moment at the end of season 7 where they're talking about baking cookies, and it feels like Buffy might actually be saying, like, at some point, I want to end up with Angel. The only chance they had for that was either Angel giving up his mantle, which was not going to happen. And as we saw him in the Angel show, we saw that that was never ever ever going to make him happy, right? Like he needed to atone for this. That was kind of his core thing. And again, that we have the same job, right? The two of them in season 2, Angel and Buffy, like we have the same job. So this should work as a workplace romance. But the thing that was missing in the workplace romance was the two of them having each other at the top of their goal chains, right? Because both of them still had their callings at the top of their goal chains. That was the most important thing to them in terms of when they were going to have to make prioritization decisions. Both of them were always going to choose the mission over the person. And in order for that to change, one of them or both of them is going to have to change their fundamental nature. And the only way that was going to be possible for Buffy is if she wasn't the only one. So, on some level, the ending of season 7 made it possible for her to start her romance novel arc now, because now she doesn't have that. She would never have been able to have a person at the top of her prioritization chain. It just would never have been possible. It wouldn't have been possible with her mother, with her sister, with anyone. Like the closest she got was Dawn, but that still wasn't about Dawn. That her sacrifice was about her mission still. It still was not about Dawn. And this is I feel like, again, looking at the arcs, it's where does the arc land you? What does it teach you about that person? And what it taught us about Buffy was that death was her gift, not just to her sister, which, yes, it was handy that it also saved her sister, even though I still don't think that it should have. I think, anyway, I'm not going to talk about that because we're not talking about holes in the plot. But death was her gift to the world. And realistically, that it was her gift to the world, not just her own death, but giving death to the enemies of peace was her gift to the world. And once she got to a point at the end of season 7 where she could give that gift to anyone, right? Then that made her arc land in that way. But because her romance was never really the point, we're not going to see the thing that would have really been the most beneficial for her. So we saw the sort of workplace romance with Angel that was, we're never going to choose the mission. And then the workplace romance with Riley, where he chose her over the mission and she couldn't choose him until she did. And again, I think that moment doesn't get enough airtime when she went after that helicopter. That was the first moment that I sort of saw it would be possible for her one day to throw the mantle down. Because I think on some level she realized, and it wasn't about Riley, by the way. This is why I said, like, even if you don't like Riley, this is a development arc point for command, for significance, for strategic. It is that recognition that I'm never going to feel whole and integrated no matter what I accomplish in my life, no matter how much I fulfill the mission. This is the thing she had to learn before she could really get set up to offload that responsibility to all the potentials. She had to learn about herself that it was possible for her to be something other than the Slayer. And not in a like I think she was turning her back on the calling when she went to Riley. It's that in every single moment of her life, always, she was prioritizing the call, the mission, into every generation a Slayer was born, right? She was prioritizing the call. And in that moment, when she realized, if I'm going to last in this life, I'm going to have to learn how to be vulnerable with someone. I'm going to have to learn how to let somebody in. I want connection bad enough that I'm going to take the chance that he might hurt me again. I'm going to take the chance because I want that connection badly enough that I am not going to hold myself back anymore. And even though they didn't end up together, because I don't think they should have, I think Riley was better with the woman that he ended up with, right? They were more equal. He was always going to struggle, but I think someone more like him was a better fit for Buffy in terms of what actually solves the connection issue for command or for significance. And this is so important. It's so important. The world revolves around you when you are a significance or a command. And the easiest way for that connection arc to happen is when either you value someone at the same level they value you, so that, like, maybe ideal, I guess, that everybody's looking for of we both love each other in the same to the same degree, or the significance or the command has to be the object, right? Just because if the significance command person, especially if you add significance into that, is the chaser, it's going to cause some difficulties because that command has a natural withdrawing energy, especially when it's dominant, right? Because that command energy is, I am here, I know what's going on, I will take the hard hits, and that by nature requires a little bit of the withdrawing energy. And so there, you need to have that, either this or Buffy has to be here, and the person who loves her has to be fulfilled, because Riley wasn't fulfilled. He wanted this, has to be fulfilled, sort of putting her on a pedestal. So I think she would be good here, but I think she would be better here. Not because she can't integrate into secure attached, because I think she can, and probably did after the end of season 7, because we saw a major growth arc in her in the later seasons, but specifically because she's never going to stop being the chosen one. Even though you see her empower everyone, she's never going to stop feeling the mantle of the Slayer. She felt it for so long. She's always going to feel like it's her job in any individual moment to be the person who's going to save the world. So, and that is that command energy. Like, if I could step in, I'm going to step in. If it's not being done correctly, I'm going to step in. Right. So the romance arc of Buffy was not the point. So we're not going to see her with the person she needs because it was just a subplot. It wasn't like the Willow and Tara, right? Where I think that was sort of the, this is what she needs, Willow, in order to be her like whole and integrated self. She needed that person who was both in love with her, but also would hold her accountable, but also would adore her, but also she adored, right? Like she need that equality. And she had that in Tara, which I think was really cool. But which I think was necessary for her. We needed to see one relationship in that show that wasn't just a profound like pain point, right? So at least we got that one respite. That was great. But in terms of Buffy's arc, we didn't get to see her in her romance novel greatness because she wasn't ready yet. And I think that cookies analogy at the end and see in that last episode of season 7 was really the right thing. Like she wasn't done baking yet. It's not going to be Angel who eats the cookies. It's going to be somebody else. And it's not going to be the immortal. Those of you who've watched Angel, it's not going to be the immortal either, right? Like she hasn't had her romance novel arc yet. And I don't know if they're going to do that in the new show. I don't know if they're going to, like make her be married or, any of that stuff. But I am very interested to see what they do because I think that'll be fascinating. But anyway, let's move on to a different pain point or development point of command. So isolation is a really big growth arc for people who have high command and high significance. If it's a significance thing, it's feeling the world on your shoulders, right? That causes you to sort of withdraw from people or feel like you need to be self-possessed in some kind of way or responsible for yourself. With command, it is, I need everyone to listen to me, so I can't be too connected to them, right? Like that. And I think that's kind of more what we see in Buffy, especially in season 7. And she even makes a comment when Faith says, you know, and Buffy's saying, if I had a chance to pal around, I could play the popularity game. And they're listing off all these things, and Faith is like, maybe you could have learned their names, right? And you hear Buffy say later, like, it was not learning their names that made her able to lead the way she needed to lead. Because even though we don't like thinking about it, there are times when that empathetic sort of care for individual people is not going to be helpful for us because we need to make some hard decisions. And I'm not saying we shouldn't have empathy. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying in those moments where they're in like battle stations, it is necessary to have at least some distance from that. And you can know the names of the people that you like, are standing shoulder to shoulder with. But on some level, it is necessary to have some distance from people. And I think Command understands that. So in season 7, you see this kind of arc with her of her coming into her command essence in those last episodes, probably the last 6 or 7 episodes when Giles comes back. And it's I have these mentors and they are not serving me right now. They're not serving the mission right now. Because again, that number one priority is always the mission, right? And you see her developing this sense with her command of, if I'm really going to be in charge, on some level, I have to be the one calling the shots. And I can't just be listening to everybody. And you see this isolation kind of arc that she goes through in the end of season 7. And then that very end of like everyone kind of coming back to her and saying, I guess you were right all along. That feeling for the command strategic is like, yeah, I know. I was right all along. And she does a good job of not doubling down on that feeling and of still just leading them because of course they were in a crisis situation and she needed to. But I think it's also really important. There's a couple of different moments throughout those last episodes. One was the Spike, the nights that she spent with Spike at the very end of the show. The other one was when she saw Clem when he was driving away. You do see these moments of extreme empathy from her, where, like, yes, she is this withdrawn, self-possessed, commanding general type, but she also has these very empathetic, very vulnerable moments that she's learned how to have kind of over the course of the years, where she can both have this hard leader, command general style person. And then she also has this kind of soft center of herself that she hasn't lost, which I think is really important because as you develop that ability to be commanding of people, being able to learn how to maintain relationships inside of that is really important because the best leaders don't just make you feel well led. They make you feel important. They make you feel like you're part of the mission as well, which I think is really an important thing to acknowledge about how well she develops in that arc. In terms of her significant strengths, there are a couple of really important moments that I want to highlight about the arc of someone who has high significance because she has several different arcs of several different strengths, strategic. She has some kind of a relationship building strength, and I'm still not sure which one. It might be connectedness. I would really have to think about that. I have been rewatching some episodes with very specific goals of trying to see the behavior in those episodes, and the blue strengths just are not as visible. except with her Scooby Gang people, right? Like with the, um, especially with Xander, Willow, and Giles. But her blue strengths are not as visible, even in her romantic relationships. But strategic, command, and significance are probably the three kind of big arcs that I see the most. And the significance arc is I need to know that I'm important. I need to know that what I'm doing matters. And there are a couple of moments that really stand out to me in this arc of hers. Apart from, I do think there's this element with Angel and with Riley where she knows that the mission is her life. And part of her validation of that is seeing that these men she values also think that way about what she does. Like they take seriously her contribution and how good she is at what she does and how called she is to what she does. They take that seriously. And you see her gain a lot of confidence from those moments where, especially when Riley's first learning about who she is and he's kind of starstruck by being with the Slayer, and it creates tension with Buffy and Maggie, right? Which is also really that, like, that arc was really well done in terms of two high significance women wanting the same attention from the same man, apart from all the edible stuff that was going on there as well, right? But this, I was here first and he was important to me first, that Maggie had. I used to be the center of his life that Maggie had. And then when Buffy comes along, there's that conflict between the two of them, right? But so that's one element of Buffy's significance is the way that she interacts with these other people who are high significance and the way that they see her, or people that she holds to be significant. Like when she thinks that Maggie is significant, when she thinks that Riley or Angel are significant, and then they reflect that significance back to her, you see her perk up a little bit, right? Like you see that acknowledgement of her significance matters to her. The other really fascinating significance moment was the prom episode in particular. And I would say the beginning of that arc was ended in episode 4, season 1, the freshman episode where the umbrella that she gets at the prom gets broken, right? And she's also going through that moment of, am I really significant anymore? Does it even matter? That kind of feeling, right? And then you have that callback to this prom episode. But in the prom episode in particular, partly because of what she's going through with Angel, she has this distraction of my only value to people is the safety that I can provide them. Like, I'm not valuable as a girlfriend to Angel anymore because he's cast me aside. And so my only value is to, and that kind of martyr complex, right? Which typically, when you would see a martyr complex in like a significance person in real life, that would be a cry for help on some level, right? Like it would be, and not a cry for help, let's call it a bid for connection. Maybe that's better because significance receives connection when you give them significance, when you tell them they've done something important, when you show them that what they're doing or saying is important, when they see that evidence, right? And when Buffy is saving the prom, which she sees as this is the only value that I can provide, right? Which is a very common kind of significance martyr feeling. And again, the writers did such an amazing job of aligning these particular pain points of these particular strengths and then fixing them in the way that they need to be fixed in order to feel resolved internally, in that personality trait. And so that prom episode where she has that feeling of, I am insignificant, my only value is in what I can do for people, then to have the whole school acknowledge her at prom and give her the umbrella, in particular, the little parasol, right? Uh, that was the actual solve for that feeling, which was really cool to see because as a significance person, we talk a lot about the development of significance, in the BFA as being learning how to find all of the significance that you have. So when you, as a SIG person, are thinking, well, I need more significance. I need the bigger platform. I need more people to listen and or read. And we don't actually take into account the not just gratitude, because it's not like, well, just be grateful for what you have. No, no, no. It's you have to be responsible with significance at a smaller level. If you're going to be able to be responsible for it, tolerate the pressure, handle all of the work at the higher level. If you can't be responsible with being significant to a group of people, a small group of people, then you're never going to be able to handle it at a larger group. So we want to focus the significance people on finding those moments that they already have in front of them and maximizing those moments for as much as they can in terms of how to learn how to be significant to people, because being significant is a huge responsibility. It means for Buffy that sometimes I don't get to go to the prom. Sometimes I don't get to do homecoming. Sometimes I don't, like, I can imagine Buffy's wedding where she's just getting ready to go down the aisle and the master reincarnates and she's got to go fight him because she can't say no when the significance is that high. No matter what's going on in her life, she would have had to throw it all down and go fight that battle because she is the most significant person in the world in that way. And when you have high levels of significance, you have to be able to respond to them with effectiveness. So you have to be able to say no to the small things that are insignificant in service of the small things that are significant. If you ever want to have the capacity to be able to tolerate or handle the hard work and the pressure of being significant at higher levels. And I think the downside is a lot of us who have high significance, I'm a high significance person, so I struggle with this from the inside. Um, a lot of us who have high significance are always looking at the feeling that you're going to feel when you get to that level. Like if I just had Oprah's platform, then I would feel so significant and that would be great, which is not untrue. You would feel significant. But the downside is you would also have the responsibilities of that significance. I don't get to do whatever I want because I have responsibilities for thousands of people and the way that we're teaching and the amount of content that we produce and the volume and things like that. And then I have to learn how to balance those responsibilities. But when I had a smaller platform, I didn't have to learn that much balance. I didn't have to be as conscious. I didn't have to monitor as much. If I had a bigger platform that I have now, which I don't even think that I would want, because the platform I have now, I don't know how to manage effectively, right? So if I'm that person who has not learned how to be significant at the level that I'm at, how to maximize the significance of where I am at the prom, let's say, I can't save the world. I can't take on that level of responsibility. And yes, there are those moments like the feeling in the middle of the prom episode or the feeling in the middle of the freshman episode where it's like, I feel insignificant. Yes, we want to close those loops if we can. Yes, we want to find ways to remind ourselves that we are significant, but we also have to acquire the skills to be significant at the higher level. If we actually want the bigger feeling of significance, it's going to come with a hell of a lot more responsibility and a lot more pressure and a lot more pain. And we have to be conscious of that as well. So getting the most out of the level that we're at becomes hugely, hugely important. Okay, last comment, because I think this is both the end of the significance arc and the end of the command arc. And for me in fiction, this is how I know what dominant strength is being shown in a whole arc is what's the resolution of the arc. And the resolution for Buffy's arc, which happens in the last episode, no shock, but it happens about halfway through the last episode, which is that every single girl gets the power, every single potential gets the power that they were supposed to have, right? So when you think about the resolution of the command struggle with being the only one who has this power, the significant struggle with being the only one who has this power. And then the resolution of that struggle is that every potential becomes empowered. That is the most beautiful landing for a command struggle or a significant struggle that I could possibly think of, because that is really what the highest ascension level of both those influencing strengths are, is the gift of self. And so when I am a command person, if I am too focused on what that command gets me, on how I feel when I get command or how I feel when I get significance, I am not going to have a sustainable life as an extremely high command or extremely high significance in terms of the levels of significance that I have or the levels of command that I'm taking. It's not going to be sustainable if it's all about me all the time. Because if it's only ever about how I'm going to feel, then I'm going to make horrible decisions trying to feel more significant about myself. But that needs to be healed. I need to heal the part of me that's afraid of vulnerability. I need to heal the part of me that's afraid of other people having all the power, the part of me that's afraid of losing my utility or my significance or my worth because other people are also significant. I have to heal that as a significance person if I'm going to land that arc correctly and have a sustainable life as an extremely significant person. Otherwise, it's going to kill me to have that level of responsibility because I'm not going to be able to sustain. Either I'm going to make horrible decisions for myself and it's going to hurt my friends and family, it's going to hurt me potentially, it's going to hurt all the people that that hold me to be significant, or I'm going to crash and burn, or it will actually physically cost me my life because I'm not able to do this in a sustainable way. So when we reach that kind of ascension top level, right, in the Enneagram, they have the levels of health and strengths. We have balconies and basements. When I reach the very, very top level balcony of that significance or that command, it always looks like empowering of other people and not convincing other people they have power so that they'll feel better about themselves, so they'll give me more significance. That is not what empowering looks like. It is not making people feel secure because I have taken all the power and all the command, and I've convinced them that by doing that, it's in their best interest for me to be the one with all the power and all the command, which would sort of be like the dictator version, right, of command. The very basementy, by the way, extreme basement of significance when I'm only convincing people that they have power, but I'm not actually giving them the power. The difference with Buffy in that arc is that she actually gave away the power, and it didn't diminish her at all to empower people to have their own agency. It didn't diminish her power at all to equip and empower other people. But what happens when significance is in an extreme basement, in those really low levels of health, because the only thing I can do is take significance from other people, I'm not capable of reflecting significance to other people, of helping them find their agency and their own significance. We see this in somebody like Taylor Swift, let's say. So, where there's this feeling of, I feel like a more capable person, like a more whole and healthy person, as opposed to some of the significance people that we might see in the influencer domain, where all they can do is just amass larger and larger and larger amounts of followers because they need more and more and more and more from their followers. It's like being a virus, right, on their followers. And the pain point there is that that is not sustainable. Again, for me, this is why that arc is so important for Buffy, is that we're actually seeing a real life version of what alignment looks like for people who have those two strengths. And that is the power, similar to how the power of Ted Lasso was that everyone felt like they were validated and belonged in that. That was the sort of highest ascension level of that woo, that positivity, that developer, right? The highest ascension level of a significance, a command, probably all yellow strengths on some level, is that every single person who comes in contact with you has a greater sense of security and agency that comes from something replicable. It comes from that inner power center that all of the potentials got, where they don't actually need Buffy around anymore. They now have this self-possessed sense of agency. Buffy could cease to exist and they would all still have that self-possessed sense of agency. They don't need constant contact with her in order to produce that. She's giving them the power. She is empowering them with their own agency, which again is that ascension level of that command and that significant strength. And it's so amazing to see that because it provides us with a growth arc for ourselves when we have those strengths of what that can look like through fiction, potentially for some of us, through, developing or teaching, through service, through there's all so many ways you could be significant, or again, take command. But that healthiness is about the sustainability of the growth or the sustainability of, like, again, having more and more and more and more significance and command power. Clearly, I could talk about Buffy a lot. I've had this temptation for a long time to just do a whole bunch of episodes on like different episodes of Buffy because there's so much that we can learn. And when I tell you the arcs in those episodes of both Buffy and Angel have not only like alignment, veracity to particular real life resonant things, but also teaching. And this is what I love so much about both of those shows is that you can actually learn if you follow the arc of those people. You can actually learn the one difference. I will say the one blip in this was the Cordelia mid-season 3 through season 5 for me. That arc doesn't make any sense to me. So anyway, apart from that, there's so much teaching capacity in so many of those episodes. And so maybe someday that's what I'm going to do with my life is just have a Buffy and personality podcast. Because I honestly, trying to narrow it down on my notes, if you could see the notes that I have, there's like 45 lines of things that I could have gone into, and I had to narrow it down to just these, really these two strengths. And I didn't even really talk about strategic that much. But anyway, if you are interested in more of these, we have several character episodes that were at the beginning of season 7 here, and you can watch the Ted Lasso episode maybe. We are going to do some more of them throughout this year just because they have been so fun for me. And I think they're really helpful for illustrating certain parts of people's personalities, and again, how to write good characters, because I think that's important as well. But I hope you've had a good time watching and or listening to this. Please come and follow us on our newsletter. You can follow us for free on the Patreon if you want to. We have a lot of interesting discussions over there, and we now have the capacity to comment on the free level posts as well. So for the posts that are visible for you on the free level, you can join there, and you can also have some fun with us without having to pay anything if you don't want to. So you can just hang out there if you'd like. And we will see you for more episodes of the Quictast. We do have some more character-driven episodes coming up. And we also have some QTP, question the premise episodes about different things in the writing community, which I'm really excited to do as well. So here's hoping that you have a happy writing time the next time you open your manuscript. P.S. It could be right now. Spoiler alert, you could do it in this moment. Go open your manuscript. All right. I love you all. Have a great week. See you next time. Bye.